Good afternoon, all of you. Welcome to a webinar organized by Solventure Academy. My name is Sacha De Backer. I work for Solventure already quite some time, and in the latest years, since a few years, I'm director of a unit within Solventure, being Solventure Academy. And today, I would like to bring you a few things that we have been working on, that we have been asking our customers, and that we are thinking about, and that is the systems versus people topic in times of crisis. Before I get into that, let me first introduce very briefly who is Solventure for those who don't know. I'm going to keep it short, promised, and I also very briefly will touch on the services that Solventure Academy can provide, but again, I will keep that very short. If in the meantime, by the way, there are any questions that you want to ask, there is a chat box. You can already enter them. Of course, I will not go to those questions until the end of the webinar. Solventure, well, Solventure, a company that basically helps you in improving your supply chain performance, your supply chain execution, your supply chain capabilities in many ways. People, process, tooling, analytics, those are the four building blocks that we work around. We do have a very strong unit working on SNOP software implementations, of course, which was also my past. But apart from that, we are, as the four pillars say, also working on the people and analytics and the process part. So we are helping companies on that aspect as well. In the center of our offering, or in the center of our philosophy, is the supply chain triangle, which you may or may not have heard. And our approach these days is a 7-step approach for implementation and for improvements, to which I will come back later today or later in this webinar. Solventure Academy, well, as I said, I'm director of Solventure Academy for a few years now. What do we do with Solventure Academy? Well, we're an academy, so we provide training. What do we train on? Well, we train on supply chain functional knowledge. So you should not expect the user training for this or that software from us, but we really work on the general knowledge in depth, or rather commonly on supply chain related topics, going from forecasting over inventory management, over supply planning, strategy, finance, whatever have you. Basically 4 different formats. On the left, you see the public training. That's accelerator days, 3-day training, where we go entirely around that supply chain triangle. We talk about demand planning, we talk about product management. Next day we go in inventory and supply planning, and the last day we talk about executive SNOP. 3-day training, very broad audience, and very well respected, very well received, I have to say. Then we also have the charger sessions there. The charger sessions are basically 2 hours, 3 hours, strategic finance topics that are typically aimed at VP level, C-level kind of audience. On the right, and that's maybe more interesting, we see the boost camps and the development programs. Development programs are in-house, yearly recurring supply chain academies tailored to your needs, because that's what we do with Academy. We don't bring standard material, we tailor it to your needs. And in between, we have the boost camps. And a boost camp is, in essence, anything that you would ever need. Do you need a 1-day training on demand planning? Do you need 2 days training on inventory management? Do you need a roadshow of 3 days of training on midterm planning and going around the world to explain that to certain production sites? A bit harder in these times, but that's actually the kind of things that we can provide there. That being said, that's what Academy does. Functional supply chain related training tailored to your needs. And we are part of Solventure, which in essence helps you with your supply chain on many aspects, also with a very strong software and tooling component. Right. Now, the webinar that you registered for and that you are attending is the webinar on how do processes, tooling rather, software systems relate again or compete against people in tackling the latest crisis. And the latest crisis, of course, the pandemic, COVID-19, which in essence was a black swan event, and we just want to know, or we wanted to know how important both elements have been playing in tackling the challenges ahead. For that, we launched a survey, and I'm not sure if any of the attendees filled in that survey up front. But what we wanted to feel with that survey is what kind of challenges have you been facing, and while facing those challenges, what were the things that help you in tackling the challenges ahead. It's not a very scientific survey. I will vouch that, but on the other hand, it does give some insight on what are the people struggles in these latest crises. On the left hand, we see a few questions that are in essence assessing a little bit the impact on both the company and the personal life and the workforce. On the right, we see a few questions that are more looking into getting some insights on how did you respond and what was basically enabling you to respond in such a way. The first question was, what was the impact of the pandemic on your business environment? And then on four different elements, one being the materials coming from suppliers. So did you have any disruptions upstream in your supply chain? The next one, well, the demand from customers. We all know that demand has been severely affected during the crisis, but was that the main effect, or was it maybe a positive effect? People could answer it to be a positive effect as well. Did you have a lot of struggles in your own production or distribution capabilities, facilities that had to shut down or things like that? And well, for your company as a whole, how about that? Were you negatively impacted, positively impacted, maybe no impact at all, neutral, whatever have you? Well, as expected, of course, most companies had a negative to highly negative impact by the pandemic and the COVID-19. Mostly on demand by customers, almost all of that told us that. And also the incoming materials from suppliers were negatively affected. A bit surprisingly though, but good enough, is that the own production facilities were not that much a problem. Okay, so that's maybe because of the industries that have responded or whatsoever, but that was not really an issue. Apart from all the negative impacts, there were one or two companies that could tell us that actually for them it was a reverse thing. They benefited from the situation. They had a positive impact on their demand and so forth. So also to be expected that is not that is just a minority of companies, but some companies basically had a ball during these latest months. The second question was to get a feeling on, well, how was it affecting your staff? Did you need to do more? Were you swamped by the work, or wasn't there anything to do for you? Did you have to lay off people? Did you have to struggle for survival, or could you actually reap and benefit the opportunities? And there we see, luckily, that the impact is not as dramatic as you could expect based on the responses in the first question. There are indications of workforce that needed to be sent home. There are indications of people that had to work, so to speak, twice as hard, but not as strong as you may have expected in the first place. On the opportunity aspect, well, some companies were able to grasp a few opportunities. A few other ones, well, were losing opportunities, really had to struggle for survival. For a lot of them, it didn't really change a lot. So, okay, that's a nice spread. Working from home, that's question number 3, in essence. Did you and your colleagues change to working from home through digital online platforms? What do you think? I think about 70–80% of respondents said, yes, I stayed home. I had to stay home. And that's not so surprising in our range of roles and functions, I would suspect. However, there were a few people that did not work from home. I don't know how they did that, but okay. And there were a few people that only partially started working from home. So, okay. So that's on the, let's say, the impact that latest months have had on those businesses and those people. I said on the right side, which is maybe more interesting, is, well, and how did you react? So we got a good mix, I believe, of respondents that tell us that indeed they had some issues, or quite some big issues, because of the pandemic. Now the question is, how were you able to react? And the first question is, can you rate your company's response on the aspect of speed, accuracy, consistency, flexibility, internal or external communication? And being it professional pride or not, in any case, the nice thing is that almost all respondents said we were very good on the aspect of speed, and we were very good on the aspect of consistency, which is good. let's be happy with that. There were a few exceptions on the rule, so apart from that, everything was neutral to very good. So there were not really big flaws there, which surprised me a little bit, because I would have at least have had a few bad, expected a few bad ratings, for instance, on flexibility or whatever, because you could not react quick enough. But that being said, it seemed to be quite okay. Accuracy, however, and communication, but mainly accuracy, was one that popped up from time to time as being not rated that well. And I can imagine if accuracy, if you take it as a forecast accuracy, or adherence to production plan, or things like that, that kind of accuracy, well, that will have gone down the drain, of course. Question number 5. Well, if we look at those 4 elements depicted there: standard systems and procedures, knowledge and experience of staff, database scenario planning, or a mix of the 2 or the 3 above, which of those were blocking you or enabling you as a company to create your response? The one that came out as being the most enabling element was knowledge and experience of the staff. And of course, that's one of the things that we wanted to get a feeling of in this survey and in this webinar. So it doesn't really surprise me. However, we saw that suddenly scenario planning, and that surprised me a little bit, from time to time was really a blocking thing, or neutral. So I would expect that scenario planning from a system point of view is something that you really need in these kind of times. But apparently, it was more of a blocking thing than an enabling thing. Maybe because they didn't have the right tools to create the scenarios, or maybe because they didn't have the time, or maybe because the scenarios were bogus. Right. Of course, there was a final question, and maybe the most interesting one. And that final question was, well, considering your experiences during these COVID times, if you would have time and money to invest upfront to better prepare your company for the next wave or a next black swan event or whatever have you, where would you put your money in? Would you put it in systems, advanced supply planning systems, and control systems, and provide a basic user training to your employees, basically meaning I will put the systems up front? Or would you invest heavily in educating your workforce and in supply chain, so that they can react quite quickly with fact-based decisions, even outside of systems? Well, and these were the results. If I click on the right button, that's what you're going to see. Which means that, and the numbers, I have the numbers, 71% of the vote told us that they would first invest in education and not in systems. Well, before I continue, let me quickly ask you guys a thing, because that's actually what all these tools and webinars are meant for. I'm going to launch a poll, see if this works. Actually, the question that I will ask is, does this surprise you? Yes, or no? And I'm going to give you a number of seconds to vote on this poll. If all is good, you should see it. Yeah, I see answers coming in, so that's good. And let's see what comes out of it. Let me share the results. What does it show? Well, basically almost the same spread. 75% says no, that doesn't surprise me. 25% says yes, that surprised me. So it's quite consistent. That's a nice thing to see. All right, it even surprised me that it's so consistent. Okay. Now let me, if all is well, you see the PowerPoint again. Now let me maybe give us our take on this and our view on this. In essence, when we are experiencing such a pandemic, such a black swan event, such a disruption, the thing to react with, the good reaction indeed is speed and consistency. I mean, I'm very happy that that popped up because I could use it on a slide, title of a slide, speed and consistency. Be fast and have a direction. But of course, well, being fast asks for a few things, and getting in a certain direction consistently also asks for a few things. And the thing that is behind it, I would say, is fast decision making. Fast decision making, well, the fast, there's a speed, of course, and the decision making, well, there's a consistent direction that we are going to have a direction. You need to make a decision, of course. And there were a lot of things going on. We've seen that. I'm repeating probably, or I'm stating some obvious things perhaps, but suppliers were running out of materials or got closed. My demand was going through the roof or got completely obliterated. We had facilities that we had to close, people that could not come and work, and so forth and so forth. Having all that there, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of impressions that you need to grasp, and sitting back and just watching how everything is rolling out is not an option, because the chances that you will be hit by something that that is not working in your favor are pretty hard. But then what do you need to pick on? What do you need to pick up to prevent that? Well, to my mind, that's where we are going to use both systems and people together to get to that fast decision making. And let each of those have their own strengths and their own roles. Fast, well, that's what we need systems for, or that's what we use systems for. Number crunching, a lot of iterations, a lot of calculations, certainly these days, with all the big data analytics and so forth. Let those systems help you in being fast, in having quick analytics and so forth. However, the decision making itself, in the end, it's still a human thing. Even though there are a lot of advances, I know, in the artificial intelligence and whatever have you, still, in the end, it is a person or a human that will be in the driving seat. Even if we mimic a human in the system to be faster than us or to process more data, in the end, it will be the human that is making the decision. Now, if you have systems to be fast and humans to make the decision, well, one could argue, and we hear that argument a lot, well, so I just need to have a good system, and I need to train my users for that system, and then everything will roll out as expected. They will do exactly what is needed. They just need to validate one or two things that come out of the system, and there you go. Which is not in line, of course, with what we heard or what we saw in the poll, but still, that's an argument that is on the table very often. Which brings me to the following one. RTFM. Why is it not enough? RTFM, for those who don't know, it's an acronym and stands for, well, read the, you can fill in the F yourself, manual. And if we extend that, you come to a point where you can say, hey, wait a minute, I've invested heavily in the system. And in essence, everything should be documented in that manual, whether it's a built-in logic because it's a out-of-the-box kind of tool, out-of-the-box module, or whether it's a logic that has been configured and built in during an implementation project, you would expect that in a manual all the ins and outs of how to work with a system are illustrated, and hence if a user knows that manual or knows how to read that manual, they can put the system to their own use and push on the right buttons to get the desired outcome. But the system only goes that far as all the buttons that are provided during that implementation or during the creation and development of an out-of-the-box solution. And understanding what is really behind that logic, well, that's already the first step to be working with the system. And it's not because you can push a button that you will immediately understand all how do I say that, all consequences it has in a real life environment. And I'm going to illustrate this with an example, probably makes it a lot more easy. It's not one company, it's at many companies that I've heard something like the following. Probably you've heard already of the concept of a customer order decoupling point for your inventories. Well, at least you must have heard about the concept of make to order versus make to stock. Where make to stock, we go through all the stages of our supply chain to make sure that we have a stock of finished goods available somewhere to deliver to our customers upon immediate request. So the order of the customer comes in and immediately we ship out from that stock that exists there. The push system, because everything up until the stock needs to be based on a forecast. The make to order policy, well, it's moving more upstream the supply chain, where we say, well, we will not keep stock of this and we will only launch a production of that finished good once we have received a customer order. Okay, this should be rather well-known stuff in a supply chain environment. And what we very often use that for, that difference in stock strategy, production strategy, or whatever you want to call it, is that, well, if we have a number of items that have a low volume but a high variability, keeping stock of all those finished goods is putting a lot of stock at risk, and we can't forecast it properly, and well, many small amounts accumulate to a big amount. So if possible, we want to revert that to a make to order kind of policy. Yeah? Of course, make to order, you only launch a production after reception of the order. It by definition means that the waiting time for the customer after sending the order and getting the goods in is longer. Yeah? Now, and that's a little thing that sometimes you see is not fully understood by those that those in the company that work closely with the customers. The story goes that, well, the example goes that an account manager, a nice person, was made accountable to change make to stock or make to order parameter in the system according to agreements with their customers on certain products. And this person, really trying to do good for the company, indeed switched a number of items from make to stock to make to order because it was too low value, it was too unpredictable, and so forth. So he said, yes, I agree, let's not keep stock on these goods. Let's make them non-stock. The only thing was the person did not really realize that that means that it's going from a make to stock to a make to order policy. In other words, that if he keeps on promising the same thing to his customers, meaning I won't keep stock, but when you place your order, you will get a next day delivery, then you come into an even worse position, maybe, than before when it was a make to stock item with a high variability and a low volume. Why? Because now, or the customer is not really happy because it takes a number of days before the product is produced anyway, and then it still needs to be shipped, or your production is not, your production facilities and your production planning is not so happy for the simple reason that you need to disrupt the production plan and install a rush order and so forth, and to quickly make this make to order item to keep that customer happy. Once trained and once initiated in that concept and all the consequences and so forth, you could give some person access to that make to order, make to stock, stock, load stock kind of decision. But as long as they don't have had that more holistic training on supply chain, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to give them a manual that will tell them how to change an item from stock to non-stock. You could argue that, well, maybe then we should better design our system or better work with the proper rights and the proper access to get to prevent this kind of thing happening. But this is just an example of so many things that can happen if a user is only looking at the system being some collection of buttons and fields, but does not look into what that system basically is meant to plan for. On top of that, what is making it a bit worse or more challenging is that the system only has been defined at a moment that is not, well, probably not at all similar to the environment we are working in right now. Yes, that's the entire meaning of a crisis, disruptive event, and so on. Things are not according well, old standards. So in that case, following and trying to push a button left and right in a system that has been designed to provide or to follow a certain logic in normal times, well, it doesn't take a very smart person to see that that will probably bring you in a lot of trouble. So those are the moments that you need to enable what I call the manual override. It's like you're sitting in a car that is basically designed to drive itself from A to B, which is more and more becoming a technology that is available or almost available. That's all pretty fine, but we're still far off from the moment that we will completely trust that car and will completely take out all manual overrides. Why? Because there are still things that we want to be in control of ourselves. That's one thing. During a time of crisis or during a time of changing times, your people need, or your staff need to be able to basically switch on the manual override and then also know what they are doing. Why? To account for the different approaches that are necessary. But to enable that, well, remember that in the poll in the beginning, it said that the knowledge and the experience of the staff was actually the biggest enabler on reacting in such or such way to this crisis. Well, knowledge and experience of staff, that's something that you need to build. And so it already starts proving a little bit that that argument of I have a system and as soon as a user, and afterwards I will train my users. So if they know how to use the system, everything will work itself out. So I put the system in front. It's we've heard that many times, but actually this is all proving that that is not the case. And that's only one thing. That's during these pandemic and crisis and disruptive moments, but those disruptions happen more often than we think, and you can build your systems to be able to handle all those different scenarios and to be flexible and so on, and to have a few key users that can really change the logic of the system. Yeah, all right, that's very nice, but then you still need to have that built in, and to have that built in is something that typically is part of an implementation project. In that implementation project, typically you will have some back and forth discussions on what exactly is the logic that you are looking for. What are the different scenarios that you want to be able to prepare for? Because they are not the same for everyone. And to have those discussions, again, you will have to educate your people first. Now, I promise to come back on that 7-step approach of Solventure towards sales and operation planning maturity. There's a webinar that goes into depth on these 7 steps from awareness and vision, engage, design, implement, improve to sustain. So I'm not going to explain the 7 steps as such. What I want to point out is that, as it says here, we more naturally integrate people, process, tooling, and analytics. Well, that's where Solventure Academy also provides its services during implementation, after implementation, and before implementation. Also, aside from any implementation or tooling implementation, we do that. But during those tooling implementations, we also want to be part of getting you and your staff up to a level that you can help us in going through those different stages in a very efficient and value-adding way. Awareness, the moment that inside your company there needs to be build on creating some more awareness on what is supply chain, what are the ins and the outs, in what aspect is it the backbone of a company, and how can we make sure that it becomes a basically a strategic asset instead of a cost. From that part on, but also to a later stage, like for instance the improve stage, where you want to be able to look at your systems and sit back and say, okay, this is what we are missing, this is the logic that we have built, but maybe we need a few things more, maybe we need to add a few things and make sure that it properly reflects the changes in our business environment. Well, for all those stages, I'm not going to go through all 7 of them, but for all those stages, properly educating your workforce is almost a condition sine qua non for having your systems efficiently implemented and used afterwards. So basically my conclusion, or basically the message that I wanted to put here in this webinar is, well, we have seen, or we have consulted a few companies, a number of companies, on what were their challenges during the pandemic and how did they respond. The challenges were as expected on most aspects. How did they respond? Well, speed and consistency apparently was rated as being the best part of that response. And what enabled it? Well, knowledge and experience of the staff apparently was key above systems and above data-based scenario planning to be able to react. Still, it's in our DNA. We think about people, process, tooling, analytics. I think for fast decision making, you still need a tool because you need the fast component, and with all the data and all the stuff going on, an Excel will probably not cut the deal. Maybe for some high-level scenario planning, but not for all the ins and outs. On the other hand, the human still needs to be in the driving seat, and that also means that during times of big changes and big disruptions, a human should also be able to pull the brake and go in manual override, because the system will not provide for the new environment in which you are working. And well, if that is such an important thing, it gives a little bit the reason of existence of a unit like Solventure Academy and functional supply chain training that are also important next to maybe implementing tooling and systems. And in our 7-step approach of Solventure, we can provide an exact match on training to your people, to your staff, according to their needs, according to the gaps in knowledge, according to the next step that needs to be taken, according to the next growth in maturity that you want to achieve. That is in essence the message of this webinar. I will now give you some time to launch a few questions. I see that there is one question coming in already, and I am going to, where am I? Aha, here it is. Should you track accuracy during crisis? I already know it's bad. Well, that's a very good point indeed. Because yes, I think you should track it, because then you know how bad it is. But should you pursue in getting it better? That's maybe an entirely different question. Imagine that some of your demand is dropping heavily, because you have been forecasting it to be high and suddenly it drops very low. Well, your forecast accuracy will be affected. There are two things that you can do. You can alter your forecast, of course, to provide for the new environment you're in, and closely monitor when that demand maybe comes back or never again. the impact on forecasting and demand planning is maybe a topic for another webinar. But the question is also, are you going to then change that accuracy measurement? If that's an automatic thing working in your system and it picks up that drop in forecast accuracy, and then it takes some time before it starts picking up the getting back close to your real demand kind of thing, because it is working with a weighted maybe or whatever over a 3-month average or something like that. That's maybe a moment that you need to tweak your system to not be blinded by that forecast accuracy. What is more important is in my last phrase, don't be blinded then by that forecast accuracy. You know it's bad. If it's bad, well, why is it bad? What is happening? Go for a root cause analysis and work on those root causes to repair them. Well, maybe they can't be repaired in the short term. Maybe you don't want to repair them because maybe you're living in a new world. Maybe you were able to change the company and not care about that forecast accuracy anymore, or whatever accuracy you're talking about. But to enable that, and certainly to bridge that until your systems are, let's say, back on track, you need that human knowledge in there. So that's certainly one of the moments that, the manual override and the manual preventing yourself of being blindsided by looking at the old targets and working the old ways is certainly very important. So this is a very good question. Well, probably I have been very clear, or probably everyone is so well educated that they don't have any questions anymore. Do you want to know more about Solventure Academy? Do you want to know more about what we can do and what we may do for your company in pursuit of your system implementation, getting the staff up to speed, maybe recovering from these periods, or preparing you for next periods to come, whether it be pandemics or whether it be other things that just slash into your business? Well, this is where you can find us. Get in touch with Solventure Academy or just through the normal Solventure channels. And then I thank you all for your attendance, and well, hopefully we meet in real life one day when all is back to a new normal. Thank you very much. See you later.